Pour out your fear. It promised to be a sleepless night. I didn't drink coffee, the adrenaline would do its job anyway. My laptop was loaded. Sheets of paper, notebooks and pads, pens and pencils were everywhere. Let's also not forget the whiteboard and markers in the great room. I sat down in the bedroom chair, hoping to get some rest. A rumble in the hall brought me out of my drowsy stupor. With my laptop in front of me, I peered carefully out from behind the door. It was standing by the window, amidst the lumps of earth and shards of flower pot. What used to be my cactus was a tall plant. A creature with a sturdy-looking green stem, with moving tentacles, all spiky and needy, and big purple flowers and mouths like a Venus flycatcher. It didn't respond to me in any way. I tiptoed in, sat on the edge of the couch, and clicked the keys. It immediately perked up and quickly crawled toward me. Apparently it couldn't see, but it had other ways of sensing reality. I jumped up and barely had time to cover myself with my laptop when it spat a light green liquid at me. I ran out into the hallway and from there into the bedroom, locking the door with the bolt I'd attached beforehand, and wiped the laptop with a towel I'd hastily grabbed from the dresser. Among the flowers were mouths with needles pointing inward, so that what got in couldn't escape anymore. The plastic case of the laptop melted a little. I waited for a while, going over everything I could see and listening to the silence. Then I opened the door ajar and stuck a furniture brush through the crack and waved it around. No acid attack followed. I looked out, very conveniently, that I was wearing glasses. That seemed to be it. I sat back in the chair again, but didn't have time to come to my senses. I was conscious for a moment, and then I fell into utter darkness. I tried to look and realized that I couldn't feel my eyelids or my eyes. I couldn't feel my body or my weight at all. Where is the top? Where is the bottom? My vestibular apparatus could have been indignant, but it was as if it wasn't there either. What is this? Paralysis, coma, death? Was I lying in my chair, blinded, stunned, with my senses gone? Or was I like a disembodied spark of the mind, hovering in the infinite void of a black, starless space? Was I in danger of staying here forever? Panic was building up in me. Could there be anyone else here? Countless myriads of lonely grains of sand like me, mute, powerless to reach out to each other? What if someone dangerous was just closing in on me? Eternal loneliness seemed scarier than even that. And who could be dangerous to a disembodied spirit? I had nothing to write on, and there was nothing to record. I had heard somewhere of a water chamber where they put a person in complete darkness. True, you could move around in it. The sensory deprivation brain was generating hallucinations. Would I be able to conjure up images of anything on which to fix my impressions? I tried to imagine a whiteboard, but the darkness seemed to laugh at me. Maybe just reciting to myself whatever I had to say about it, the place, or condition. My senses returned, abruptly. I was, indeed, half lying in a chair. And something like a snake was leaning over me, a woman's head on a long neck. It was peeking out from behind a chiffon-robe door, where the night sky was visible and a warm breeze was blowing. I knew what this creature was. A character from Japanese folklore who loved to snoop, gossip, peep and eavesdrop. Most of them were unaware of their demonic possession during the day or tried to get rid of it, but at night they scared random passers-by and peeked through windows. Lily-white face, lined eyes, traditional Japanese hair with bobby pins. I jumped out of the room and leaned back against the door, pounding on my laptop keyboard. The hall closet opened, scenting me with the sense of blooming gardens, and she emerged from it, opened her bright scarlet lips, and squealed. Her mouth was full of sharp fangs. I grabbed the first thing I could get my hands on and hit her from the side when she came at me. I managed to duck under her and hide in the bathroom. I locked the door and quickly leaned against the hanging locker, blocking the exit from it. Once again there was a piercing screech. With my back I felt several thumps, jolts. The others were taking pleasure in their condition and possibilities. This snark turned out to be a boojum. But she wouldn't get my blood. Aiming to drink the impressions of other people's lives and relationships for lack of expressive enough of her own. Perhaps dressed in a kimono. The tremors fell silent. After a couple of minutes, I opened my locker. Toothbrush, toothpaste, pills. I walked out of the bathroom and away. I shouldn't have sat in it. Here I was backed into a corner. I wondered what the doc would say about it tomorrow, or rather today. I didn't get to my room. A light white haze swirled around me, swirling and flying away, erasing my world and replacing it with some other one. The wasteland, the cracked earth to the horizon, the thin dead trees sticking out here, and there under a dull white sky. The air is dry and still. The absence of sense. The silence that consumed you. It seemed that the whole world was limited to this plane, and no matter how much you walked across it, you would meet nothing new and not a single living soul. unwanted by anyone. Doomed to perish here and diversify the landscape with your mummy. I lightly touched one of the branches. A hard, rough surface. In the distance I could see a white speck and went there. I had nothing more to say about this world. Perhaps there were other places full of life and color here, but I didn't believe I could reach them. If I had been here hundreds of thousands of years earlier or later, I probably would have seen jungle thickets or mangrove swamps. Or maybe the same plain. But now, even a tumbleweed. I was the only source of movement here. It turned out to be a horned skull. So at least there were living creatures here before. The scenery of this world shrank. The next thing I knew, black smoke crawled across the floor. I rushed around looking for the source. It was rising everywhere, as if from cracks in the floor. As I typed, glowing letters and bizarre, animal-like clubs swirled around me. When he hid the laptop, I had to write by touch. When he reached around my neck, I tried to inhale as deeply as possible. When he wrapped his head around me, my ears began to crack with laughter. When are you going to dissipate, you bastard? What else hadn't I noticed? Unable to contain myself, I inhaled, piercing my lungs with an unbearable pain. The laughter stopped and the smoke cleared. Cognitive therapy is certainly paying off. It's not for nothing that the doc says you shouldn't rely on medication alone. From the street I heard roaring, shouting, screaming. I went to the window. Despite the deep night, it was as bright as dusk. And below a group of people were being chased by several huge prehistoric monsters. A woolly rhinoceros, a bull, a saber-toothed tiger, a cave bear and a lion. The runners didn't seem to stand a chance. Like an avalanche, the beasts descended upon them, knocking them down, trampling them, raising them on their horns, tormenting them. No, to attack each other. I could not see whether these men were familiar to me, but it didn't matter. They were all not real. Just ephemeral ghosts plucked from the abyss of non-existence. The night returned. The time of childhood fears, frightening shadows, creaks and rustles. A pale glowing transparent ball floated out from under the bed. Before I could describe it, it caught up with me and touched my laptop. The screen immediately went out. I grabbed my notebook and hurriedly scribbled. The contact with the ball sent shivers down my shoulder and down my arm. The ball darted out of the room. When the lights abruptly disappeared, I understood why. He had knocked out the power in the hallway switchboard. I wish my cell phone was on the charger and not in the middle of nowhere. Bingo! I switched on the flashlight and finished the description of the object with the board and marker before he could get back. Now it was time to get the power back on as fast as possible. I rushed to the switchboard and already in the corridor I heard a rather loud chirping sound. The beam of the flashlight caught a monstrous insect out of the darkness, as long as a man, all in spikes and with huge jaws. I walked sharply back into the room. Green-orange coloration, chitinous shell, 6 paws, and faceted eyes. I grabbed a chair and swung the door open, thrusting it forward. And I could barely keep the frantic creature from tearing at me, pushing as hard as I could on the cracking chair. The difficulty was that I had to hold my cell phone with my flashlight on with one hand to get a better look at it. Then I somehow pushed her out into the hallway, on its paws like self-cleaning brushes. Stiff elytra, and apparently a sting. The sounds went silent. I wiped the sticky sweat from my forehead, turned on the light in the electrical box. I collapsed helplessly onto the couch. The room was getting hot. It wouldn't be long before the night was over, and I could finally renew an expired prescription for medication from the doc. But where was the heat coming from? The heat was already rippling around me. As I inhaled, I felt the warmth of the air, something that had only happened to me once before in my life. On one of the days of abnormal heat, I armed myself with a notebook and pencil and walked around the apartment, looking around. It was business as usual, but the temperature clearly continued to rise. The air was already burning my skin. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator to see if it was working properly, and to drink a cold soda if it was. But instead of inner chambers, there was a passageway into the cold, wintry world. Staying in the apartment was no longer an option. I grabbed a sweater and a jacket and climbed into the unexpectedly inviting Narnia. However, this location bore little resemblance to a fairyland. It was more like a snowy desert. There were drifts of snow everywhere, and protruding blocks of ice could be seen in the distance. As I got closer to them, I could already make out that there was something inside them. Or rather, someone. People. And I knew those people. All my family, relatives and friends. Acquaintances. All of them were frozen in ice in different poses. Some appeared to be asleep, and some had open eyes and a look of terror on their faces. I knew they weren't real, but it was hard to look at them. Nevertheless, I walked past them, describing them all in my notebook, barely manipulating my stiffened fingers. Standing like ceremonial guards in front of a palace gate, sitting with their arms and legs and necks unnaturally twisted, their faces tilted toward the sky or lowered to the ground. And when I was done, I realized that the cold had become unbearable. I somehow made my way through the drifts and back to the kitchen. The door slammed behind me. I opened it and saw my usual refrigerator. I sat down on a chair and began to rub my hands vigorously. I had goosebumps running down my body. I turned on the coffee maker, wondering if I would have time to drink a cup before the new performance. I wondered if she would pull my lip, for that matter. The aroma wafted through the house. I took a sip of coffee, trying to warm up and recover. Not to think about what I'd seen. To banish those ghosts not only from the world around me, but also from my own memory and imagination. It was dawn outside the window. I'm safe now. I will go to the doc and get a new prescription. No more putting anything off until the last minute, risking being without medication. I will not let myself be shrouded in nightmares from my subconscious, ready to burst into reality and wreak havoc.